Hey, it's Jamie Scrimger. When I became a stepmom, I quickly realized that while moms are encouraged to keep it real, there's a big double standard when it comes to stepmoms. So I decided to start the conversation myself. Thriving as a stepmom doesn't just come from conversations about being a stepmom, though. Here we dive into marriage, relationships, personal growth, and more. My mission? Inspire you to live a kick-ass life while bringing you along as I create my own. This is the Kick-Ass Stepmom Podcast. Hello. Welcome to the podcast. All right, guys. So it is not very often that you see male content creators creating really vulnerable content online. But that is exactly what today's guest, Drew Holst, is all about. So after his marriage ended a few years ago, Drew went on a journey of healing and self-love and has been sharing his journey online on Instagram. And I stumbled across his profile when I was scrolling one day, and I've just really loved his content ever since. He openly talks about his journey with self-love, healing post-divorce, his personal development journey, his co-parenting experience, and dating after divorce. I love how vulnerable he is, and I am thrilled to have him on the show. Let's dive in. Drew, welcome to the Kick-Ass Stepmom podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today. I've been kind of like diving into your Instagram, get lost in your stories and all of the stuff that you're sharing about your healing journey. And I was like, I got to get this guy on here.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I'm honored. And candidly, I've only been on social media for 3 years. It was when I started this Instagram account. It's really been the last year that I've sort of grown the account that I have. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. So let's talk about that. Like, what made you decide to start sharing online? Like, why don't you share a little bit about your story?
So my parents were divorced whenever I was 3. And so the majority of my time growing up, I was raised by my mom. So predominantly a single parent household. My dad was in the picture, kind of in and out. And my mom got remarried whenever I was a freshman in high school. I say all of that to say that I didn't necessarily have any real substantial role model marriage situation that was placed in front of me as a kid. And so whenever I got married, I kind of had these ideas in mind of what I thought a good husband should be. And it was really just sort of like, happy wife, happy life, and just sort of go all in on being a husband. And then we had kids only a couple years later. And then I went all in on being a dad. And as a result of that, I kind of lost myself. I shouldn't say kind of, I did. I was people pleaser extreme, and that was outside of the marriage anyhow. I put all of my eggs in the basket of being a father and of being a husband, and I really just deprioritized my own needs and just went in all in on them. And so unfortunately, as a result of that, I put an unfair burden on the shoulders of my ex-wife, meaning like, hey, if you're not happy, then I'm not happy. And so that sort of led me down this path of unhappiness. We ended up getting a divorce 3 years ago. And it was probably one of the darkest times in my life, just stepping into this unfamiliarity, not sure, not being sure of what I was going to do with my life at that point. The majority of my adult life, I've been married. And so I kind of had to rediscover myself because I hadn't done anything for myself in some time. That was really what started my journey of healing. But what made me realize that self-love was going to be a part of that healing journey, which is really a cornerstone of my entire page, is me learning how to love myself again. There was one particular situation where he's a good friend of mine, but he happens to be my boss. He was one of the first people that I told that I was getting a divorce. I sat down in my office, I was talking to him, and I was sharing some of the reasons that I believed that my marriage didn't work and my contributions to why it didn't work. And I was not feeling good about myself at all in that moment. And he looked at me and he said, Drew, I don't know, what your ex-wife may think about you under all of this or what anybody else thinks about you through all of this, but I think you're a grade A human being. It was really eye-opening. It was a breakthrough moment. And I thought to myself, I want to be able to look myself in the mirror and think about myself in the same way that he does. And that was when everything sort of flipped. And I knew that I needed to go on this path of healing. I needed to regain my self-confidence. understand what it is that I bring to the table, not only for the sake of my kids and my family and friends, but to the rest of the world, and just kind of rebuild myself. And it's been 3 years now, and I'm in probably one of the best places I've ever been.
I love that. And good for you. What does the dark phase look like after divorce? I know that a lot of people, there's people in marriages that are unhappy right now and they're like, this isn't fulfilling for me. There's also people who are going through divorces, or there's also people like it has nothing to do with their marriage. They're just in this really dark place. And I think we talk a lot about the transformation. We talk about, I was in a dark place and now here I am. Right. And I don't think we should share that behind that muddy behind the scenes, like in the moment, like that should be the crux of everything. But I think there's people who are crave, like, what does that look like for you? So when you say I was in a really dark place, like, what does that mean for you? What was that experience like?
So, leading up to the time that I got my divorce, what I'd like to be able to share in this is my responsibility in terms of how I got to where I was. I made decisions. And by the way, as a side note, me and my ex wife, textbook co parenting situation. We have a great relationship. I'm so thankful for that. I wake up every day being grateful for the fact that we get along as well as we do. We get along better today than we did when we were married. Unfortunately, as a result of a lot of the decisions that I'd made while I was married, that's what ultimately led me down to the dark place. I'll give you an example. There were some situations that in an effort to keep the peace and to take the high road, I paid the price for some of the relationships that I had outside of my marriage. Because I made that decision without necessarily even knowing it, I was growing resentful over that. And because I no longer had these relationships that I'd once had, and because I was neglecting my own needs, and I was sort of thinking to myself, like, I'm doing all of this. I'm pouring all of this into my marriage and into my family life, sort of like, I guess if you want to call it like a victim mentality, maybe that's what I had back then. Like, hey, I'm sacrificing all of me, all of my happiness for the sake of this situation. And there's no consideration necessarily for what my needs are. And I didn't necessarily do a great job of articulating those needs either. So that's sort of the prequel, if you will. That's what got me to the point of unhappiness that I was at when we finally got divorced. And then enter into the new chapter, I had to figure out who I was because I'd neglected my needs for such a long time. I had these glimpses of who I was prior to me getting married. And so I had some things to kind of tie myself back into. But I was 17 years older at that point by the time I stepped into this new chapter. So I had to figure out, like, what does Drew like to even do? And by the way, tucking my kids in every night, every day they'd been born, to only seeing them half the time, that was another very dark time for me. So just going through not being able to see my kids every day, that was incredibly hard. So those two things, and then there's probably more I could list, but another thing that's really important to mention is the people that I sort of considered friends, if you will, weren't necessarily there for me when the marriage ended. You sort of have couple friends, right? And then you have like single friends when you're single. Well, the couple friends, for whatever reason, they just sort of like kept their distance, and it made me really reevaluate the people in my life, which is really at the core of a lot of the self-love type stuff that I talk about, is being very selective with your circle. I have a pretty small circle today, but I'm perfectly okay with that. It's super quality versus just kind of surrounding myself with lots of different people, not really even knowing if they're a true friend or not. And so that was also part of the darkness that I was experiencing. I did it alone for probably the first year. My family doesn't live here. It was just me by myself. When I had my kids and my job, it was just like a lot of just rolling my sleeves up and figuring out who I was, figuring out what I needed to do to gain my self confidence again. And then I would say it was really that first year where I made a lot of headway. And then it was just sort of building blocks after that. And it's still that way to this day, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, that's the whole process of personal growth and self-development and self-love. Like that is not something, there's no finish line.
Right.
I think once you start the process, it's like you can't unsee things and then you see more things. And it's just like there's always more work to be done. You know, I'm a huge lover of Element. It is my go-to electrolyte drink and a longtime sponsor of the podcast. So yes, Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt and no sugar, no artificial ingredients, no coloring, no BS. It is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited if you're following a keto, a low carb, or a paleo diet. I just did the metabolic reset, which I've shared about on the podcast, and it was totally okay on that as well. Basically, if you're a professional athlete or you're just an everyday mom, it is for you. Element is a huge part of my day to day, whether it be rehydrating during workouts, when I'm traveling, after maybe a little too much wine, in my cocktails and my mocktails. Like, I am always popping the Element salt into my drinks. 100 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium. I have one every day. Seriously though, about the cocktails, throw in some lime Element salt with soda, tequila, lime, and mint. It is so delicious. So staying hydrated is a crucial and huge priority of mine. And proper hydration isn't just about drinking water. It means having adequate water and salt. And big news, Element just introduced Element Sparkling. So again, no sugar, there's no caffeine in this, all electrolytes. Element Sparkling delivers the same zero sugar electrolyte formulation that I have been telling you guys about, now in a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling water. I couldn't have got better news. This is so exciting. I'm such a fan of Element. Already put it in my soda water. So this just made my life so much easier. Element Sparkling offers health seekers an all-new option to support their health across the board spectrum of occasions. So with each can, you're taking a sip against sugar and stimulant-loaded drinks, and you're turning the tide towards health. I am so pumped for this. To grab some Element, head to www.drinklmnt.com/kickassstepmom and get a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. That's just the drink mix purchase. I love these free sample packs because it just gives you a chance to try all the flavors and decide which one is your fave. Mine is watermelon. Darren loves lime. Head to www.drinkelement.com/kickassstepmom to get a free sample pack with a purchase of a drink mix and keep your eye out for the new Element Sparkling. Seriously, cannot wait. For a while there, Darren and I were out of sync. From our calendars to communication to what was going on in each other's lives, there was just so much going on that date night and connecting with each other fell off the list. And when we did have one-on-one time, Reese was with us. Surprise, surprise. It was just such a challenging time. And I know that you guys know when your relationship isn't solid, the extra stressors that come with step-family life don't always feel worth it. So keeping your relationship on track is very important. Insert Coupla. So Coupla is a relationship app created for couples by a couple. It has helped thousands of couples connect using a shared calendar, to-dos, and reminders to spend more quality time together and connect on a deeper level. The calendar feature allows couples to easily manage each other's work and home schedules while also incorporating various family calendars into one convenient location. The calendar allows couples to prioritize date nights and quality time with each other and navigate through calendar conflicts and scheduling challenges that arise from juggling work, kids, exes, and more. Now, one of the big challenges that stepmoms have is that they aren't always in the loop about schedule changes with the kids. I don't know about you, but this used to drive me crazy. Coupla can help with this. When your partner adds a new schedule to the calendar, you will automatically be in the loop. You can also keep date nights on track with the date planner. As we all know, a regular dedicated time with your partner is one of the best things you can do for your relationship. But with work and friends and children and all the things demanding your attention, it can be hard to carve out that time to be together. So you can plan dates easily, get reminded about your upcoming dates, and keep your date nights on track. Coupla also has the only task manager and to-do list specifically designed for couples. Beyond simply managing groceries, couples utilize these lists to organize everything from planning their next vacation to managing a home renovation to curating exciting date nights ideas and keeping track of gift ideas. Coupla is offering a 50% discount off an annual subscription for my listeners for the first year. All you have to do is enter Jamie when you check out. You can get the link via my show notes, or you can also download Coupla from the App Store. And after onboarding on the subscription page, you can click redeem offer and enter the code Jamie to get your discount. How do you feel your childhood when it comes to that, dynamic? You grew up with a single mom, your dad in and out of the picture, so you didn't have that healthy relationship to kind of look to. How do you feel like that showed up in your marriage? Do you feel like you were trying to like almost prove like I'm going to do this right? Like there was like I didn't have this, so I'm going to create this.
Very much so. And I think that's just a personality trait of mine, just in general. And because my mom's going to listen to this, it's incredibly important to point out that she was and is not only like the most incredible mom in the world, like the most incredible person in the world. And so a lot of who I am to this day is because of her. And so even though I didn't necessarily have that marital role model situation in front of me, I had somebody as amazing as her that was her own role model in a sense. And I think kids don't want to disappoint their parents either. And so you go so far as to make a decision to get married to somebody like, all right, I'm going to do this right. Not only to make mom proud, but like there were certain expectations. Like I have an incredible family, quality people in my family. And it's like, hey, I'm undertaking one of life's greatest journeys in getting married. I want to do this right. And so I had these visions in my head of what it should be. And I don't know, maybe it was, watching movies too often I'm not even really sure where I gathered the information from, but I certainly would say that it did impact me, not necessarily having, because you have some of these people that have mom and dad, they've been married for 40 years. They still hold hands walking through the mall. They all of the good stuff that sort of is role modeled. You see even, disagreements, but conflict resolution is a part of that. You get exposed to some of that stuff. I didn't have any of that. And so I think because I didn't have all of those little intricacies of a healthy marriage right in front of me during my childhood, I just had sort of bits and pieces of what I believed it should look like.
Yeah, well, it's those beliefs about how things should look, I think, that get us into trouble. I know it's definitely been the case for me. And, I saw something on your Instagram I loved. You were talking about your mom and just how you can look back as an adult on what your parents went through. Like, I think when we were kids, we just think they know everything, they've got it all together. And then you realize, like, man, like they were hurting or they were struggling, they were navigating all of this on their own. That you just have such a larger appreciation and maybe even a little bit just more grace for our parents when we look back as parents ourselves. You're like, wow. Because I don't know, like none of us really know what we're doing, right? We're all just kind of on our own journeys and healing and living and trying to do the best that we can. And it's like you look back at your parents and you're like, oh, you were going through your shit too.
Right, right. Well, and it's funny. There have been people with, because I have two. One's almost a teenager, but I have two boys. One's 12 and one's 14. And so I have other friends that have young kids too. And whenever they talk about the fact that their kids think they're nerds or they don't have an appreciation for the sacrifices that they're making for them, I said, you know what? Like I've always loved my mom, but it wasn't until I was probably in my early 20s that I was able to like wrap my head around everything it was that she had done for me. And that's not to say that my kids don't have an appreciation for me or for their mom either, but I think it's when you get older and you sort of enter into adulthood, then you grasp like number one, being an adult is hard. And then having to stack on top of that being a parent, that's even that much harder. But one other little side story that I'll share with you also to your point, I made mention of my dad sort of being in and out of my life. Presently, he's not in my life, and that was a conscious decision on my part. But, we were on again, off again, and somebody let me know that he was sick and that he wasn't doing well. This was several years ago, and he had never met his grandkids at that point. It was exactly what you're talking about that made me give him the second chance that I gave him. Like, hey, I now know that being a dad is not easy. So I can sort of look back and understand maybe a little bit some of the mistakes that he made along the way. And it was in that moment that I chose to give him some grace. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end great, but that was a defining moment in me making the decision to try to mend ways with him was because like, hey, I'm a dad now. I know it's not easy, and so I want to give him a chance to see if things can be better.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And I have a complicated relationship with my mom, so I can understand how that can ebb and flow. And there's obviously lots of complicated dynamics. When something you said about just the resentment piece really hit for me, and I think it'll really land for actually a lot of the stepmoms who listen to this, because obviously my audience is primarily stepmoms and co-parenting and all of that. And I think when it comes to step parenting, it's very similar to what you were saying. Like, you sacrifice who you used to be, you go all in, and you're doing all of the things for all of the people are trying to show up in the way that you think you're supposed to show up in life. And then when you don't get that, maybe it's appreciation, or maybe it's the acknowledgement, or maybe it just doesn't feel the way it's supposed to feel, or doesn't look the way you think it's supposed to look. And then you end up having this resentment. And when you've lost yourself and who you are and who you stand for and like what you really love, it's a hard place to crawl out of.
Right.
Like, it's a hard place to come back from. It's true. It's like that victim mentality. You're still looking at everyone else being like, well, I'm doing all of this. Like, why don't I feel differently? Why isn't this different? It's like that victim mentality and not taking responsibility for your relationship with yourself. I feel like you have to be in the place to hear that. But once you hear it, it changes everything.
It really does. Well, and I don't know, because I wasn't on social media before 3 years ago, so I don't know how often it was spoken about before I got on social media and started to learn more about it. But it was people like Mel Robbins, Sylvester McNutt, a lot of the notable names out there that talk about self-love and the fact that you're responsible for creating your own happiness. And the timing for me was just really, really good. I didn't realize at that moment that that was the real missing ingredient. And the fact that me not putting my needs first was not only affecting me, it wasn't allowing me to be able to show up in the lives of the people that I loved as the happiest, healthiest, most whole version of myself that I could. I was seeing it as like, hey, I'm just going to pour all into you and it'll come back almost in this karmic way. But that doesn't happen. You're the one that's giving. If they choose to give back, that's on them. But it's also on you to choose to give to yourself first. And that was the missing ingredient for me. And so it's, I don't know if it's unfair to the other people to feel resentful, because that's a decision that we make, right? Like we make the decision to do the things that we're doing. And I think at some point for me, what I've realized, and this is for me, is that I had to take ownership of the path that I wanted to go down, who I wanted to redefine myself as. And I haven't quite stepped foot into stepmom or stepdad territory just yet. So that's a different dynamic that I don't have a full understanding of just yet. So it's hard for me to completely empathize what that might look like. But, as I enter into romantic relationships myself, I think it's really important that I share some of what it is that I've been through, let them know that I'm still very much a work in progress. I'm way better than I was 3 years ago, but self-love is super important to me. And so, I think it's important to have two healed people sort of like going down that trajectory at the same time. And then hopefully that will avoid some of this resentment that we're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And so when we're talking about self-love, what does that look like for you? So if someone's like, okay, self-love, got it. I think people get confused when we say you got to put yourself first. It doesn't mean you're like, screw you, I'm not coming home for dinner. Like, I'm doing whatever I want to do. Like, I'm not doing my responsibilities. Like, it's not disrespecting other people. It's not like not meeting the needs of your children and the people in your life. Like, that's not what self-love isn't being like just a selfish jackass. Self-love is,
Right.
Putting yourself on the list, prioritizing yourself too, because we're the first to fall off, right? But so what does that look like for you, especially in this season of your life?
You actually hit the nail on the head how I was going to define it, where, let's say there's sort of a spectrum, right, of responsibility to other people and to yourself. I think it's selfish to sort of end up all the way on this end of the spectrum, and then it's people pleasing to end up on this end of the spectrum. So I think like self-love really sort of exists, so like an ideal spot of self-love sort of exists somewhere in the middle. So as an example, let's say a friend of mine called me today and said, hey, would you like to grab a drink tonight? It would be perfectly okay. Like if I'm just not in the mood, or if I don't feel like I'm going to be good company, say, hey, you know what? And especially if they're a good friend of mine, you know what? I'm going to pass tonight, but can we look at some time next week? Maybe we can get together then. That's sort of putting my needs first. And it's not only for my sake, it's for their sake as well, because maybe I'm not going to be great company for that person. Now, let's say we planned on going to some event together and I wake up, I don't feel like going. And I just cancel on them. You can't do that necessarily. I don't think you should in the name of self love. Like, I just don't feel like going. I know I made a commitment. And I think that's where you sort of can fall into the category of being a jerk. So that's just one example. I mean, I think other things for me is I think in simple terms, it's creating a life for yourself where you get to do the things that you want to do with the people that you love. And it's just figuring out what that looks like for yourself. And what all goes into that is prioritizing your needs, surrounding yourself with the people that want to be a part of your life as much as you want to be a part of theirs. I still have people pleasing tendencies, but I'm not anywhere as bad as I used to be. So sort of walking away from people pleasing. I'll give you an example of that. My youngest son plays flag football. Once upon a time, I was the dad that would show up and all the entire community's there. Dads come up and they talk. I'm there to see my son play football. Once upon a time, the people pleaser in me would have missed my son's entire game, and I just would have stayed and chatted with some of the dads. Now, like, hey, we can get together later on. I'm going to watch Nick play. That's important to me. That's me doing something that I love for me. He loves that I'm there watching him versus him looking over to see if I watched him make the big play and I'm talking to the guy over there. So those are just a few examples of what it looks like for me.
Yeah, I love that. And that's actually, I haven't heard anyone speak about it in that way. But again, I think it takes a lot for us and it takes some reflection to sit down and be like, okay, like, what do I want? What do I need? What do I value? What makes me happy? Because we have so many different messages coming in about how we should be, how we should show up, what life should look like. And in all of that noise, we can lose what truly makes us happy, like that pressure. Even last night, my daughter was at a friend's house and my husband's away. And I was like, okay, well, we don't really have to do dinner. We can just kind of make whatever's in the fridge.
And real quick, does the stepdaughter live with
So that's
you and
my
your daughter
daughter.
also? Everybody's together?
So I
Okay.
have a daughter. So my husband and I have a daughter together. She is 9. And so that's like our daughter. And then I have 3 stepkids. So they're 21, 20, and 17. So my
Okay, got
17-year-old stepson was here and he was happy just to have a chicken burger from the freezer. Right. So,
it. Mm-hmm.
but I said to him, like, what do I need right now? I'm getting really good at asking myself, like, okay, like, what do I need? And you know what I needed? I needed to sit on the couch and watch Grey's Anatomy. Like, that is what I needed. And giving ourselves permission to do that. Because I think in this like whole self-care space and like all the things, it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to meditate. We need to work out, like like all of these things. And yes, all of those habits are in my regimes. However, sometimes self-care is saying no to what you think you're supposed to do that day and sitting down and having like a Big Mac and watching Grey's Anatomy, right? That's like
100%.
totally okay too. Like that's the balanced life.
Yeah, the way you're describing it really resonates. What you're defining is it's whatever brings you joy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think it's easy to get it misconstrued to think that like, self love is doing things that you want to do all the time. Like life isn't like that. There's going to be moments where we do have responsibilities. We got work to do. Sometimes, we don't get an assignment finished on time and, somebody's upset with us and that is what that is. So there's going to be the ebbs and flows of life, but whenever it's within our control, like doing the things that we want to do. And I can tend to be a bit impulsive like that, where, I'll decide at 5 o'clock on whether or not I'm going to go to the gym. Like it's going to I'm going to decide in that moment, is this going to make me happy today to go do it? Because if I planned it this morning and if I wasn't feeling it, then that should expectation would kick in and override me doing what it is in that moment that I feel like is best for me to do in that moment. And there's been days where that's happened where like I'll get up with good intentions, like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym whenever I get off work. But then I'm tired and I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it. I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, well, it's really good. I think it's really important for us to just give ourselves permission to do what feels right for us in that moment. It's something that I've been doing a lot lately. Waking up and be like, how would the type of person that I want to be, like what I want for me, my values, the life I'm trying to build, how would that person show up today? What's she doing today? Who's she talking to? Who's she spending her time with? Like, what's she scrolling on? Like, what is she doing for work? Like that high level person that I'm like trying to become, like my goal. What is she doing today? And I think that's such a really strong way to show up and love yourself too, because it can be so easy. Like, yes, she sometimes watches Grey's Anatomy and has a Big Mac, but like for the most part, like that high level self of me wouldn't be doing that every night. Like if I started doing that every night,
Yeah.
it would be like, that's not very,
Yeah.
and so there is reason in it, but that's a really big tool that I've been using lately and I find it really helpful.
I think it's great. Just a recent example, just this past weekend, I made the decision to paint my office. It's something that I've been procrastinating on for probably the better part of a year. I bought this townhouse that I'm in about 2 years ago, and I was originally going to do wallpaper, but I was like, paint's a little bit more budget friendly. And by the way, I'm not a handy guy at all, but painting a room isn't rocket science. But it was one of those things I dreaded. And kind of to your point, like the version of me that I want to show up, what's something that that person would do? That person would paint this office. So I stepped into those shoes of that person, and it took me about 5 hours to do. But when it was done, I felt so good about it. I was so happy, not only for like how it turned out, but the fact that I was willing to step into those shoes. I could have come up with 1,000 other things that I could have done that I would have done on any other given day. I was like, I have the time. I don't have my kids. This is a project I can take on, and now I get to wake up every day and say, you know what? I stepped into those shoes, and I can do that more regularly now.
I never understood the difference or the value in investing in good sheets for your bed until I started sleeping in Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets. They are literally unreal. It is such a different experience. And for the last several months, I have had this urge to freshen up our bedroom with new sheets and a more clean vibe and just a fresh vibe. And I've been looking for the perfect quilt to go at the end of our bed. And Cozy Earth pulled through again. I finally found the perfect one. So I got a new crisp white duvet cover, new sheets, and a quilt, and it really is looking good. Guys, you can feel the difference with their best-selling bamboo sheets made from 100% premium viscose from bamboo. They are temperature regulating, which is key, because if you know, you know. They are so freaking soft and have this oversized fit and a gentle drape, which I appreciate because it drives me wild when sheets or duvet covers aren't big enough for the bed. Like you can see the sides peeking out. I seriously hate that. So these sheets go right to the bottom. They're very deep. It just looks so good. And they get softer with every wash. For the quilt, I ended up getting the linen box quilt. I got the natural color. You know I love my neutrals. And it is woven from the finest blend of bamboo viscose and French flax linen. The quilt's texture and breathability, it's so soft and it is perfect for year round, which I love because I like to keep things simple and I don't want to be switching out my sheets or switching out my bedding for winter or spring or summer. I just want to have it work all year round. So guys, it is looking good. It is so beautiful. Cozy Earth has been a long-term sponsor of the podcast, and I have been sleeping in their sheets. I have been wearing their PJs and their loungewear for years. They are so comfortable, and it's no wonder they have been on Oprah's Favorite Things year after year, and I'm pretty sure that I just saw Kim Kardashian wearing their PJs on Instagram. I've had listeners reach out and tell me that they got themselves some Cozy Earth after listening to the podcast, and they too are obsessed. So Cozy Earth generously gives listeners of the Kick-Ass Stepmom podcast 40% off your order. So all you have to do is use the code CozyJamie40 at checkout and get 40%. Which is crazy. Such a great discount. So head to www.cozyearth.com, use the code CozyJamie40 for 40% off. So let's talk about your co-parenting relationship. You say you have a great co-parenting relationship. Tell me about it. Like, what does that look like for you?
So, since the very beginning, when we made the decision that we were going to get a divorce, the kids were at the center of everything, even to the extent we ironed out everything on our own and then just had everything sort of filed. We didn't have the big two attorneys, duking it out. None of that was taking place. That was really the foundation for it all. Like, and it sort of dictated what we were hoping the future would continue to look like. And it has. I think the good news is we're pretty much in alignment with the way that we want our kids to be raised. And I think where that can be a challenge in co-parenting is if you have one who maybe has a light hand, another one who has a firm hand in terms of, discipline or expectation or what have you. So when it comes to making decisions, we're, I'd say 98% of the time in agreement with what needs to happen. And I think because we don't have the gravity of our marriage and relationship on our shoulders any longer, it's almost like we took a step back in time to like when we were first friends almost, and we've sort of re-evolved back into that position. She has since found someone. She's incredibly happy. That makes me happy. But we just speak when we need to kind of iron some things out, whether it's a school situation or a discipline situation or whatever. We communicate really well, and we just stay in touch about the things that need to be spoken about.
So it's not like this relationship where you're like constantly still like best friends talking all the time, like
No.
intertwined in each other's lives. There's the divide. Yeah. I'm always so curious when people start dating or they're moving on into the relationship. Cause I remember with my husband when we first started dating, and we have an age difference, and, we've had this a complicated dynamic just in our co-parenting relationship. And he always would say, "Oh, we're so amicable. We're so amicable," when he was like talking about his co-parenting relationship. And I was always like, well, like until someone else comes into the picture, like until she finds out that you're with a 26-year-old, like that was my joke. I've always kind of like made light of our situation.
But did you deep down sort of believe that was going to likely be true, just sort of
Oh yeah.
on society's perception of the new woman sort of entering in the ex-husband's life?
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be so amicable the whole time. I made a joke of it. I was pretty sure there was going to be like some sort of hiccups in there, and there was, but overall it's been okay. That was my big joke. But a lot of stepmoms find that when there's this good co-parenting relationship and then a new partner comes in, it causes just a little, it's either the stepmom is like, oh my God, they're talking all the time, or they have this really great co-parenting relationship. Like, I don't even know my place in all of this. Or it causes jealousy, or, the stepmom, mom, whatever. Have you guys talked about that?
Here's what I can share with you. So first and foremost, I'll address the guy that she's seeing. He's incredible. He loves her. He loves my boys. And as soon as she let me know that she wanted to introduce him to the boys, I said, "Hey, I trust your judgment with that implicitly. I know you well enough to know that you're not going to bring some bozo into the picture." And I said, "My only request is that I meet him also. I just want to, he's going to be spending time with my kids. I just want to know him." And he was the one who really articulated it perfectly. And I sort of followed suit with this with the other relationships that I've had. I've had two serious relationships since I got divorced. He said, "I'm not trying to step in and be their dad. I'm just going to be me. And I'm here for their mom, and I'm here for them just to be me." And that's exactly who he is. So in terms of like things that we do together, like, so my youngest son, as I mentioned, he plays flag football. We all go out there. We're all at the flag football game. We'll hang out there, but it's not like we're going to barbecues together and stuff like that. Not to say that we would ever be against it. It's not so much that. We've just sort of created our own separate lives, if you will. So I sort of adopted. I was like, you know what, that was really well put. And so in the relationships that I've been in both occasions, they've had kids, and that was sort of what I articulated my belief system to be like, hey, I'm not trying to step in and replace their dad in any shape, form, or fashion. And I would sort of hold a similar expectation. And you may have a different belief system, sort of given what your experience as a stepmom is. But the good news is you just get to be you. Absence of me, like if they're about to step in front of a moving truck or something, snatch their ass up and bring them, out from in front of the truck. If it's something really bad, then sure. But otherwise, you just get to be you, and you don't have to do any of that. And so she and I were sort of in alignment with that as an idea. Me and my ex-wife are.
I like that. No, I've definitely adopted that too. I'm their stepmom, not their mom. And I've never felt like there's anything wrong with the word stepmom. People don't like it. They're like, they want to use bonus. They want to, whatever it is. I don't think there's anything wrong with the word stepmom. And their relationship with her has nothing to do with the relationship with me, and vice versa. And I like what you said, like, I'm just being me, because I have 3 different stepkids and 3 different relationships with them. right? Like my relationship with my stepdaughter is different than my relationship with my youngest stepson. He was 5 when I came. My relationship with my other stepson is different than my relationship with both of them, right? And it's based on personalities and healing and growth and where everyone's at and what they want this to look like. And that's the thing, right? Like this, what this looks like for you could look very different than it looks for me, but it's like you have to figure out what works for you in your co-parenting dynamic and in this
Yeah.
like new life that you're building.
I would even say so much that my relationship with each of my boys, and they're not even quite 2 years apart. It's a different relationship even with them, like
Totally.
not being a step kid situation too, like because they're unique individuals. Like my youngest still wants to lay down in bed with me at night, to like after I tuck him in or whatever. My oldest is like, good night, love you.
Peace out.
Um, so it's a different dynamic. I mean, because they're just these different human beings, and that's something that's incredibly important to me in a relationship is what is that dynamic of the person that I'm dating? What does that dynamic look like? Because I did have a stepmom in the picture with my dad who was on again, off again. And I always knew that she loved me, but it was sort of a strained dynamic between she and I. I accepted her, and as much as you could say I loved her, just given what the dynamics were between me and my dad, I wasn't around her as much. So, like, I can't even say that a bond was necessarily created over the years. So, I don't know what it would have looked like otherwise. But I guess what I'm trying to say is because my kids are extremely important in terms of my overall happiness of just life in general. And I want anybody that I date, and if that should become somebody that I spend the rest of my life with, I want them to be just as happy about being around my kids as my kids are happy to be around them. That's really high on my list of things to consider figuring out who my person's going to be.
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question. You said something, we're talking on your Instagram, you're talking about dating after divorce, and you said you have to take time to heal or the blood from old wounds will spill onto those who don't deserve it. Can you unpack what that means? Because I know it's very true and very important.
Well, let me give this caveat and tell you that I am still very much healing. There are things that will still trigger me based off of, and it's not even necessarily things healing from previous romantic relationships, but things that maybe happened to us as kids, right? And things that might pop up present day that will remind us of a situation that has previously happened to us. I would tell you that I've become insanely aware of how I feel at any present moment in time. And as a result of that, I can almost instantaneously acknowledge if something has triggered me. It's my responsibility to, number one, acknowledge that. And even in my most recent relationship, there were things that were new for me, new triggers, things that I hadn't yet experienced. And it's my job to say, all right, this is something that is bothering me present day as a result of something that someone else did at some point in time to me in the past. It's not fair to the person that's in front of me right now for them to pay the price for someone else's sin. Taking the time to heal and figure out how to be able to, number one, understand what you've been through. Once you understand what you've been through, figuring out how to be able to manage things that may trigger you in the future so that you don't hold other people accountable for the actions of other people. That's the blood from old wounds spilling on those that don't deserve it. So, like, if I'm in a relationship present day, if there was something that my ex-wife had said or done once upon a time, it's not fair for the person that I'm dating to see the wrath of that because I have not made the decision to heal from things that I'd experienced.
Mm-hmm. And to be able to see that, you really have to do the work on yourself and, read the books and learn about like how our childhood and our past relationships really do impact us. But I love what you were saying. Like I'm so self-aware, like you can see, what's happening like to you in the moment. Like there's so many times I'm like talking to my husband, I'm like, this is my worthiness wound coming up. But this is how I'm feeling in this, or like, this is my abandonment wound from from my childhood. And like, this is how this is making me feel right now. And he's like, okay, you and your wounds, but we're joking, but like, it's true, right? To be able to recognize, oh, okay, if you're having I had Gabby Bernstein on the podcast and she's just so wise in the way she talks about things, but she was saying like, if you're having an excessive reaction to something, Like if it's like pretty big, there's a wound there that needs to be healed, right? Like
Hmm.
if you're really, really activated, like what is that really about? But I love that because even for Darren, he comes into this new relationship with me. There are wounds from his past relationship that I had to be like, that's not true for this relationship. Or I brought in stuff from my childhood and things like that. Like I think it's so powerful us to be really conscious about how all of these past relationships and these past experiences are showing up for us right now.
I think the perfect counterbalance, what I'd like to point out to this is, so let's say I'm triggered by something from a past relationship. I point out, like I acknowledge it, but I calmly address it and I say, hey, I just want you to know, I'd like to communicate something to you that what you just said or what you just did, it triggered me. Here's why. I don't want to hold you accountable for this. However, just know that if you do or say this thing at some point in the future, it's likely going to create a similar reaction. So I would just appreciate you having some understanding and some empathy around that. Is that something that you'd be okay with? Because it's our job on the receiving end of being triggered to manage that, but there's somebody on the flip side of that who's contributing in some shape, form, or fashion that is causing that trigger. And if it's a good friendship or relationship or whatever, there should be some understanding and say like, all right, well, hey, I appreciate that. Thank you for letting me know. I don't want to do that to you anymore.
100%. I literally just like ended a couple friendships that were like not receptive to that because it's true. Like you truly do need to like accept someone for where they're at and support them and understand that, I don't know, just be open and honest about like what's going on for all of us because everyone's dealing with something, everyone's healing, everyone has their past, everyone has their stuff.
Yeah. So I'll share briefly. I had probably a 25-year friendship that only in the last, I think, year and a half that I had to end for similar reasons. So that was a really long-term friendship. We sort of went without talking for a number of years, but then got back together again as friends. Everything seemed like it was okay. He came here, spent the weekend with me in Tampa. And here's the crazy part. He hadn't changed, but I had.
Oh my God.
And so, as a result of me no longer being willing to put up with the way that he was, who I wasn't in a position in my younger years to ever do, I articulated boundaries. He continued to cross boundaries, and that was the last time I spoke to him. So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. What I was most proud of was like, damn it, I've grown. Look at this. I was super pleased with the fact that I, number one, created and enforced boundaries. I guess enforcing was the most proud moment, like because that let me know that like people pleasing Drew had really left the building, and self love, prioritizing my needs, enforcing my boundaries, Drew had entered. So it was a neat moment.
I think that's so powerful what you said and it really resonates with like my experience with that because as I reflected on the end of those friendships myself too, are they the type of people who I want to hang as I'm showing up as this new version of me, as I'm growing? But then also, I changed. I changed the dynamic. I changed the expectations. I changed the type of conversations I wanted to have. I changed where I was, wanting to put my energy. And I think acknowledging that is really powerful too, right? Because I think a lot of times in relationships, in friendships, people are growing and they're growing at different rates and have different goals and aspirations for their lives. And some people are just like fine to stay where they are, and that's totally cool. But it is okay if you outgrow a friendship. But I think what's really important is to recognize, okay, is this serving me? Like, do I feel good after I hang out with this person? Like, are they clapping when I win? Right? Am I able to have these open and honest conversations with them about how I feel? Like, I think there's the word friendship is just so broad. My husband he's like, oh yeah, he probably has hundreds of friends, right? And I'm like, well, I have three. And he's like, you don't have three friends. I said, I don't know, maybe four. I don't know. But I'm joking, but I say his definition of friendship, I'm like, they would be acquaintances to me. That's not friends. We have very different, right? And I think defining what that really means to you, like what do you want in your like core friendships? And are the people in your life meeting that?
Right.
And it can be so hard. And there's a lot of grief that comes with that when you maybe have to end those relationships or when you've evolved or relationships ends, like, when your marriage ends, your friendships changed.
Yeah.
There's so much grief and almost like shame around it. But then that's where it comes back to the self-love, right? Where you're like, no, actually, this is what's best for me and the type of person I'm trying to become.
Right. Yeah. I would say the way that I've sort of thought about like the kind of people that I want to have in my life. So the friend thing that we're talking about, I want the people that want to be a part of my life as much as I want to be a part of theirs. Meaning you can, in so many cases, and I've had people that I've interacted with as of late where they go out of their way to try to get together with someone. And that person, the other person's like, oh yeah, we'll definitely get together. But then they never really reach back out. They never really make the time, and they feel sort of rejected, and like, well, I thought we were friends. Like, well, clearly not. They don't really want to be a part of your
Hmm.
life as much as you want to be a part of theirs, and those are the people that I have them. And unfortunately it does take time to feel that out with certain people, especially if it's a new friendship, to figure out, is this on the right path for both of us? Does this work? Just very much like a relationship, is there common ground here? Do we have similar values? Do we enjoy the same things? Do we legitimately,
Hmm.
is our love tank full after we're done hanging out together? All of the things that make you feel like, hey, this is somebody. If it was 2 a.m., my car's broken down on the side of the road, they'd get in their car and they'd come get me. Are those the people?
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have been so good. I knew it was going to be a great conversation, and I'm excited to share you with my community. They're going to love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate it.
That's it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you could share it with someone in your life who you think could benefit from it. And if you haven't already left a rating and a review on iTunes, it really is the best way to support the show. And if you're craving more real talk and coaching and community, be sure to check out my membership, the Kick-Ass Stepmom community. Head to www.kickassstepmom.com to learn more.